There is a line in the book of Proverbs, fewer than 10 words long. The rich rules over the poor, and the borrower is slave to the lender. Almost everyone hears that as a warning. It is not. There is no commandment in that sentence, no punishment attached, no advice offered. It does not tell anyone what to do, does not forbid anything, does not promise anything. It simply describes a situation, flatly, the way a scribe describes what he finds when he opens a ledger and reads what is actually written there. Chapter 22, verse 7. And that is exactly what makes it uncomfortable. Because a warning can be argued with, a rule can be debated, softened, given exceptions. But a description can only be checked. You either look at the world and find it accurate, or you do not. And this particular description has been checked by a great many people across 3,000 years, and it keeps coming back accurate. A scribe of the kingdom would never have asked a man what he earned. He would have asked to see 3 things instead. And from those 3 things, he would have known more about that man's position than the man himself was willing to say out loud. Here is the first. Somewhere in your house, there is a drawer, or a shelf, or a corner of a table, where certain envelopes go. Not the ones you open, the other ones. A scribe would not ask you what you owe. He would look at that drawer, at how full it is, and he would know how long you have been carrying something you have decided not to look at directly. The amount is not what he would be reading. The distance between you and the amount is what he would be reading. Here is the second. A calendar, on a wall or on a screen, with certain days that matter more than others. The day the money arrives, the days it leaves. A scribe would count the space between them. He would not ask whether you are comfortable. He would ask how many days of that month are actually yours, how many days remain after the ones already assigned to someone else, in which what you produce belongs to you. And the third, your phone, turned face down on the table after you checked the balance. He would not ask how the number was. He would look at how quickly the phone went face down, and he would know whether you were checking a figure or bracing against one. 3 objects, no questions about salary. Because a scribe learns early that what a man earns tells you very little, and what a man owes tells you almost everything. You have probably signed something like this: a loan, a financing plan, a card agreement, read quickly, on a small screen, in a moment when the thing you wanted was much more vivid to you than the paperwork in front of it. And in that moment, it felt like a transaction about money, numbers going out, numbers coming back, a schedule in the middle. But if this verse is right, and it has had 30 centuries to be proven wrong, then money was never the main thing that changed hands that day. Something else was transferred. Something you were probably not thinking about, because nobody in the room named it out loud, and because the document itself is written in the language of amounts, rather than in the language of what amounts actually do. To see what it was, you have to go back to the world where this sentence was first written down, and that world is stranger than most people expect. In ancient Israel, borrowing was rarely what borrowing is now. The economy was agricultural, and an agricultural economy runs on a calendar it does not control. The rain came, or it came late, or it did not come. The harvest was sufficient, or it was not. A household could do everything correctly, plant on time, work hard, manage well, and still arrive at the end of a season with less grain than the family needed to reach the next one. That is when a man borrowed, not to expand, not to seize an opportunity, to eat between one harvest and the next, on the assumption that the coming year would be kinder than the one that had just failed him. And this was not a problem unique to Israel. Across the wider ancient Near East, the same pressure produced the same crisis, and the surviving legal material from surrounding civilizations wrestles with it directly. Mesopotamian law codes place limits on how long a person handed over against a debt may be held in service before being released. And Mesopotamian kings are recorded issuing edicts of remission, royal proclamations cancelling certain categories of debt, often near the beginning of a reign, restoring people and property that obligation had swallowed. Think about what those documents imply. multiple societies, independently, with different gods and different kings and different laws, all arriving at the conclusion that debt left to run on its own logic will eventually consume the population it is running through, and that somebody in authority will periodically have to intervene and stop it by decree. That is the neighborhood Israel was writing in. And Israel's own law goes further than most of it. Consider what the Torah actually legislates on this subject, because it is remarkable. A lender was permitted to take a pledge, security against the loan. But if the pledge was a man's cloak, it had to be returned to him before nightfall. The reason given in the text is almost tender. It is his covering, and he sleeps in it. The law allowed the security and then refused to let the security cost the man his sleep. Interest, charged to a fellow Israelite, was prohibited. Not capped, not regulated into a reasonable range, prohibited. A man could lend and expect the sum back, and nothing beyond it, because the transaction was understood as a form of relief rather than a form of return. And then there was the calendar itself. Every 7th year, the text establishes a release, a remission, written into the national schedule the way a festival is written into it. Now, exactly how far that release went is a genuine question among scholars. Whether the 7th year cancelled the obligation outright, or suspended collection for the duration of that year. The text is compressed, and both readings have serious defenders. But either way, the principle standing behind it is not in dispute. Debt, in this system, was never allowed to run unlimited. The law placed a horizon on it, a point on the calendar where the pressure was released by decree rather than by payment. Beyond that, every 50th year, the Jubilee, ancestral land returning to the family that had lost it, and those who had entered service to pay what they owed, going out free. Sit with that arrangement for a moment. An entire legal system, built around the understanding that debt does not simply cost a man money, it gradually reaches his land, then his household, then his labor, then his descendants, and it does this quietly, legally, without anyone committing a crime. The Torah's remedies are not written as charity. They are written as maintenance, as if the drift of obligation toward permanence were an assumed property of the system, requiring a scheduled correction, the way a wall requires repair, whether or not anyone attacked it. And when the correction failed, the outcome is on record. The books of Kings preserve an account of a widow who came to the prophet Elisha with a single problem. Her husband had died, and he had died owing money. The creditor was coming, and he was coming to take her 2 sons as servants, not as a threat, as payment, under the arrangement as everyone in that world understood it. Centuries later, in the same land, after the exile, Nehemiah records a public outcry among the returned people. Some had mortgaged their fields, their vineyards, and their houses to buy grain during a famine. Others had borrowed against their land to pay the king's tax. And the text states the result without decoration. They were bringing their sons and daughters into bondage. Some of the daughters had already been taken, and there was nothing left in their hands to redeem them, because the fields and vineyards that would have redeemed them now belonged to other men. Different century, different government, different crisis, the same machinery, running at the same speed. Which brings us back to the 10 words and to the odd precision of how they were built. The verse is constructed as a mirror, in 2 halves. The first half is wide. The rich rules over the poor. That is a statement about a structure, the kind of thing anyone standing in an ancient marketplace could observe before breakfast. The second half then narrows the lens onto one specific instance of that structure. The borrower is slave to the lender. The movement from the first half to the second is the entire teaching. The writer takes a general fact about power, then points at one ordinary, respectable, entirely legal transaction and says, This is where that power actually lives. Not in the palace, not in the army, in the loan. And the word chosen for the borrower's position is not a mild one. The Hebrew term is the ordinary word for a servant. the same word used of a man bound to serve in another man's house. The book that comes down to us under Solomon's name had gentler options available and did not take them. It reached for a strong word and applied it to something as unremarkable as owing. So the question is what the writer saw that made an ordinary loan look like servitude. The verse itself does not explain. It states the result and stops, which is what Proverbs do. But if you follow the logic it implies, one possible way to organize what is happening is in 4 layers. This is a reading, not a claim the text makes in these terms. Judge it against your own experience. The first layer is the one everyone already sees. A borrower repays more than he received, or repays across time, and that costs him. This is the layer the paperwork describes, and it is the least interesting of the 4. The second layer is where the verse seems to be operating. When a man borrows, he is not spending someone else's money. He is spending his own future income before he has earned it. The harvest that has not grown yet already has an owner. The wages that have not been paid yet are already assigned. And the moment that assignment is made, the lender holds something arguably more valuable than the silver he handed across the table, a claim on the borrower's calendar. The third layer is what that claim does to choices. A man with no obligations can wait. He can refuse a bad price and sell later. He can leave work that is destroying him and take 3 months to find better. He can let a poor season pass and plant again. A man with obligations coming due can do very little of that. His decisions get made under a deadline he did not set, in favor of a schedule he does not control. He still owns his field. He still works it with his own hands, but the range of things he is permitted to decide has narrowed, and it narrowed at the signing, not on the day he first felt it. The fourth layer is the one that took the ancient world's fields. Obligation presses hardest on the man who is already constrained. The season that fails is precisely the season in which he must borrow again. Borrowing done under pressure tends to happen on worse terms than the borrowing that came before it, and the worse terms constrain him further, which makes the next failure more likely. Nobody has to intend this. Nobody has to be cruel. On this reading, the structure produces the result on its own, which would explain why so many ancient legal systems scheduled a correction instead of trusting the participants to be reasonable. That is what the verse calls slavery, not chains. Not a master with a whip, a quieter arrangement, in which one man's tomorrow is administered, in part, by someone who is not him. And the cost of that arrangement, in the world that produced this proverb, was written in land and in families. Fields passed from farmers to creditors. Sons entered other men's houses to work off what their fathers had signed. A single failed season could move a household from the first half of the verse to the second, from ruling to serving, without anyone breaking a law, without a court finding anyone guilty of anything. The structure did the work. It generally does. And the kingdom that produced this proverb may have learned the lesson at its own scale. Solomon's state ran on obligations, provisioning districts, each responsible for supplying the royal household for 1 month of the year. Levies of labor, quotas owed upward continuously by people who had no vote on the amount. And within 1 generation of his death, the assembly stood before his son and asked for relief from the burden his father had placed on them, and the answer they received split the kingdom in 2. The archive is fairly consistent on this point. Whoever holds the obligations holds the people. It works between 2 men over a bag of silver. It works between a throne and a nation. The scale changes. The mechanism does not. Which brings the principle down to the desk in front of you. Before a debt is a number, it is a transfer of authority. That is the whole teaching, and it fits on one line. Whoever holds your obligations holds a portion of your future decisions. The interest rate tells you what the loan costs. Only the older question tells you what the loan takes, how much of your future is being assigned, to whom, on what schedule, and how much room you will have left to decide things when circumstances change. Those are 2 separate questions, and they have separate answers. The arithmetic on a loan can look excellent, while the answer to the second question looks terrible. That gap is not a modern invention. That gap is precisely what this verse was written to name. Now, one thing has to be said plainly, because the text deserves precision, and precision is the only thing separating this from a lecture. This verse does not say that debt is sin. It does not say that everyone who owes money made a mistake, or lacked discipline, or failed some test of character. And we can be confident it does not say that, because the same body of law that regulates lending also commands it. The Torah instructs the Israelite not to harden his heart against a poor brother, but to open his hand and lend him sufficient for his need. Lending, in that system, is an act of mercy. A man carrying out that command is not participating in something shameful, neither is the man receiving it. And the same collection of Proverbs states elsewhere, without hedging, that there is abundant food in the field of the poor, but it is swept away through injustice. That line is in the corpus. Poverty, in this literature, is not treated as a single cause phenomenon with a moral verdict attached, and any reading that turns it into one has flattened the text into something easier to repeat and less true to what is written. Most people carrying debt today arrived there through a medical bill, a lost job, a family emergency, a season that failed for reasons that had nothing to do with their judgment or their character. Proverbs 22, verse 7, passes no sentence on any of them. It describes a consequence, not a guilt. Those are different categories, and this text knows the difference even when its readers forget it. So what does a person do with a 3,000-year-old description? Roughly what the scribes did with their records. Use it to see clearly before deciding. Which brings us to this week's assignment. 1 hour. 1 sheet of paper. A real one, not a screen, because a screen lets you scroll away from the total, and paper does not. 3 columns. To whom you owe, how much, and by when. Every obligation goes on that sheet. The small ones too, the one you have been meaning to deal with. The one somebody else in the household is carrying, that touches your calendar as well. All of it on one page, where the whole of it is visible at the same moment. Then, at the bottom, 1 line, the total. That is the entire assignment. Not a plan, not a strategy, not a decision. Just the inventory, because you cannot negotiate with a structure you have not mapped, and because the first thing this kind of pressure does to a person is make the total feel too frightening to look at directly. Looking at it directly, on 1 page, in 1 hour, is the whole first step. Every scribe who ever served in that kingdom began exactly there. Open the box, count what is inside, write the number down. Decisions come afterwards. And for those decisions, what to prioritize, what to restructure, what your real options are under your real circumstances. Sit down with a licensed professional who can see your actual situation. That recommendation is not a legal notice bolted onto the end of a video. It is a proverb in its own right, from this same book, and it names the single most common reason plans fail. It gets an episode of its own later in this series. 1 sentence, 10 words, no commandment, no threat, no promise, just a description that has not managed to become inaccurate in 3,000 years of people testing it. So here is the question for the comments, and answer it honestly, because the answer is different for everyone. When you signed the largest obligation you are currently carrying, did anyone at that table describe it to you as a transfer of authority, or was the entire conversation about the monthly payment? Tell us which. We read them. And if you want the rest of this, the whole system, from the silver coming in to the bronze shields going out, subscribe, because we are working through it in order. Because there is one place in this book, exactly one, where the writer stops describing and starts shouting. One financial situation treated as so urgent that the text abandons its usual composure entirely and says, "Do not give sleep to your eyes tonight. Not next week, not after you have thought it over. Tonight." There is only one, and it is not the one most people would guess. That is where we go next.